It is July 18th, 2013. My name is David Quick, and I'm interviewing Louise Meyer in Mount Pleasant, Washington, D.C., in her home. We're doing this interview through the D.C. Gardeners Oral History Project, which is a project of the Neighborhood Farm Initiative and the D.C. Humanities Council. Louise, thank you so much for sitting and talking today.
Thank you, David, for inviting me.
Sure. Can you just start by stating your name and your address?
Okay, Louise Meyer, 3327 18th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20010. And yeah.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, who your parents were, things like that?
Yes, of course. I'm born in Washington, D.C. I'm now 70 years old, so that was 70 years ago that I was born in Northeast, near Eastern High School. And my family, my parents both were immigrants from Germany. They certainly had an impact on me liking gardening because they always had a small garden patch, even though we lived in an urban area.
Mm-hmm.
And later in life, after starting my own family, since I've moved to around the world and then back to this neighborhood 25 years ago, I've had some patch of some garden close to my house.
Okay.
And I still do.
Great. Your parents moved when they came from Germany. They came to D.C.
No, they first came to New York. They were in New York probably 10 years, and found that then they discovered D.C. that it was much more livable.
Okay.
They came to D.C.
But so even in your childhood, you were growing food near your home.
At least salad.
Mm-hmm.
At least salad. You know, not a whole lot of food because there wasn't a whole lot of space.
Yeah.
In little urban backyards, but at least salad, some herbs.
Okay. And this is late 40s, early 50s?
Mid-40s.
Yeah, mid-40s. So at that time, post-war, I mean, was growing food in an urban space, did a lot of people do that?
Oh, Jesus, do I remember? I don't remember. Probably I don't remember and don't appreciate it. It's only you start appreciating fresh salad when you have a more sophisticated taste buds, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since I realize that you're so involved in a food co-op, I'm curious to hear at any given point what you remember about buying food in Washington, D.C.
Buying food in Washington, D.C. was, at that time, since my parents were Europeans and they liked good bread, it was very hard to find good bread. So they would always shop at, there was a market still back in the 40s. I forgot what it's called. Maybe you remember.
Where was it?
It's sort of in Northeast, some central market. God knows, maybe it's where the Florida market is now or the Union market is.
Uh-huh.
I don't know quite where it is, but that was a regular on Saturday to go get smoked fish.
Mm-hmm.
But to get good bread was quite challenging.
Even then.
Oh, very challenging. And the location of choice was always delis, Jewish delis.
Mm.
And that kind of food.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you have siblings?
I have a sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said earlier at one point your family moved out of the city proper.
We moved to Maryland, and in Maryland we were part of the suburbia experience, which I remember not liking because it was so isolated. You couldn't play with the neighborhood kids easily. It was like everything was a car culture.
Mm-hmm.
But there we did have, I remember well, because I was there until I went to college at 18, and we always had carrots and salads and chards in the garden, in addition to lots of flowers.
Yeah. So at that time, suburban Maryland wouldn't have been nearly as developed as it is now. I mean, was it?
Oh no, it wasn't developed hardly at all. It was.
But was it? You described it as very suburban. I mean, it wasn't really country yet at that time.
It was a mix. It was wannabe suburbia, but it was still very country because the roads weren't really built yet. I'm saying that because I actually don't like that living style where you have these houses, big yards around them, and you can't get anywhere without a car. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get to school without a school bus. Whereas in downtown DC, I could walk to school. Mm-hmm. That's why I chose to live here later with my own children, so that they could actually walk to school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your family continued to keep growing simple things.
Always, yes, always, yeah.
And again, do you remember if that was something that a lot of people did?
I don't think a lot of people did that. I think, in the 50s, it was very fashionable. This is before you were born. It was very fashionable to have canned food, and it was the beginning of, the great boom of soups in a can, and my mother would cook everything from scratch. And being immigrant kids, my sister and I always resented the fact that the house smelled like food cooked from scratch. We did not appreciate it. We wanted it to smell like canned food. Mm-hmm.
No smell.
Well, no, it does. Everything has a very distinct smell, like Campbell's soups or spaghetti in a can or frozen orange juice. My mother would not buy frozen orange juice. She would squeeze oranges, saying that you're not getting any real food value from those frozen orange juice, and perhaps it was expensive. I don't know, but we craved the things that were modern to be probably accepted. Mm-hmm. It was still referred to as the melting pot at that time. Yeah. And so I think we didn't live in a neighborhood of immigrants. We lived in a neighborhood of what we called pretty upper class professionals. Yeah. And they had, with likelihood, they had more money, or we thought they had more money than we did, and had access to all these new products.
Yeah.
There have been great exhibits. I think it was down at the archives about food. That was not very long ago, of the modern world of food, food culture. The FDA inspecting food,
So was that, not all immigrants can successfully resist assimilating to the food customs of the new country. If your mother continued to cook from scratch, and that took some determination, I imagine.
Yeah, but I think I live in a very immigrant neighborhood now, although it's gentrifying and the immigrants are being pushed out. My neighbors right next door, or 2 or 3 houses right next to me, are all new immigrants, and they all cook from scratch whenever they can. Yeah. Because they like that food better. Of course, to make their kids happy, they'll have the junk food too. Mm-hmm. But the kids definitely develop a palate for the real thing.
Yeah, for sure.
They'll even occasionally, have a chicken in the backyard and figure out a way to have a fresh chicken, which is tricky because it's not legal.
Right. You talked about some of the things you grew in the garden, either here in DC, the salad, or the things out there in Maryland. Do you remember the specific varieties that would have been available to you? To buy seed?
I don't think I remember, because I wasn't really helping to plant so much as probably just watching my parents do that kind of stuff. I don't think I was into that. But I certainly developed a taste for fresh salad, and because there was nothing but iceberg lettuce at that time. Mm-hmm. And iceberg lettuce was like eating a big cabbage, right? And so definitely developed a taste for that. And now the varieties of salad that I can plant, because I continue to plant salad in my own life, are unbelievable. All the salads I can have plant. And then since we have this extreme heat right now, I'm looking to start planting again when it cools down. I'm looking for something that's a bit more robust, like what did I plant? I don't even know what it's called. It has very kind of almost curly leaves, and it's almost bitter.
Escarole?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And it just resists the extreme heat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good to know. So, last question about that time in your family's life. I mean, do you remember having a particular point of view towards growing food? I mean, it was something that your family did, but was it something you really enjoyed and wanted to learn, or not, or something else?
Well, we had friends that had farms, and I remember that being very appealing. I guess that's very appealing to any kid between, in their early teen years, to be out away and see animals and ducks, and so it was just normal to like nature. I don't think I had refined enough appreciation of. There was no processed food yet. I mean, I was a teenager by the time, and probably starting to date by the time there was something like hot shops. Hot shops where you'd go park and order something, and that was sort of the beginning of fast food. But
yeah,
there was just nothing yet. There was no processed food. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but there wasn't. Right.
But you did experience the difference between, kind of home cooked from scratch and some of the canned food that is become very just
popular.
The way.
Yeah, because most people would do their own canning. You had too many tomatoes, you'd can them, or too many apples, you'd can them, or they'd pick up apples from their friends that had farms and then make applesauce that way.
Yeah,
you can it, so it was canned, but it had no sugar in it, or very little, and it wasn't like the canned or jarred applesauce you'd buy.
Right.
It was industrially made.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And what kind of was your father and or mother still commuting into the city to work?
Yeah,
or?
My father worked at the National Bureau of Standards, which was here at UDC.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that was a beautiful campus. That hill was beautiful, a hillside full of azaleas. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he would commute along Mass Avenue into the National Bureau of Standards, which later moved out to, I think, Gaithersburg. I think it's Damascus. I think it's out in Damascus. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now it's called the National Bureau of Standards and Technology.
Right. But he was doing the suburban commuter thing.
Yes, he had to drive to do that at that time, but there was not very much traffic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I suppose it was pretty easy parking. It was just not the same city as now.
No.
The city's exploded.
Right. Right. All right. So you went to college after high school?
I went to the University of Maryland, which was considered a cow college back then. Now it has a superb reputation of being extremely good in science and technology and computers and theater and art and every field. And I did not study anything that was related to food at all. I studied foreign languages.
Mm-hmm. Which languages?
I studied German and French.
Did you speak German?
I didn't. I actually, it's complicated to explain. It was not really allowed or encouraged to speak German when I was a child. You could not even learn it in school. It was later that you could learn it in school again. So when I got to college, I went to learn German, but I learned it kind of I suppose I had some deep understanding of the sounds, just from exposure. But my parents never made an effort to speak German to us because it wasn't well looked upon.
Mm-hmm. And so you said, go ahead.
Yeah, but I majored in German, and I lived in Germany. I studied in Germany, and later married a German-speaking Swiss. Mm-hmm. And so German's been a very big part of my life. Both my kids speak German and Swiss German and French. Mm-hmm.
And so when you chose foreign languages as your field of study in college, were you looking to go
be a teacher?
Oh, okay. Was that what your career was? Or?
No, because when I finally finished, there weren't any jobs. There weren't any jobs, so I went and studied some more abroad. Went to live in Europe, and then got involved in international studies. I was very interested in living in Africa.
Okay. Okay. So, is there anything about like college years? College are often, I don't know. Our memories of food in college are generally kind of comical.
Yeah, that's true.
But you were at an agricultural school. I mean,
yes, I was. They were renowned for their ice cream.
Uh-huh.
They had that's what they were renowned for. I kind of think, I'm so old now. I kind of think food back then, like even in school, because the schools I went to, we would get food that really looked like food on our trays. It wasn't all this stuff in lots of packages. It was a plate. It was real plates and real forks and real knives. And then mothers would often volunteer and come and provide give the kids lunches out. And it wasn't the things I see in schools today, which is all like. I shouldn't say that. There's a big battle to bring good food back to the schools, and I've been very interested in following that.
Nice. But after college, you started living rather globally. It sounded like you lived in Europe and then Africa.
Yeah, I lived in Europe. Europe and Latin America and Africa.
Okay.
And you're looking for a leitmotif in my interest in gardening and food. Certainly, my experience in Africa, it was West Africa, the Ivory Coast, through my work, I was dealing with rural artisans. And artisans are always farmers. They're not just artisans. They're artisans when there's time to get away from the fields. So those countries today and back then were majority farmers, and I developed a lot of respect and gained a lot of insight into what it meant to be a farmer, or to have a world where everything is made comes from nature. The clothes you wear, the food you eat, everything.
Yeah. So who were you actually working for when you were
in Africa?
Yeah.
I had I had a contract with the International Labor Organization, which is ILO. It's an international organization that at that time had a 10-year program in the Ivory Coast to strengthen the artisan sector. To mostly focus on women, so that they could earn a tiny bit of income in the villages they lived in, since there was a lot of the men abandoned the villages. So it was to keep the artisan sector going so that people would have a reason to go back to the village and carry on the work they knew how to do from inherited work, like it was the informal sector where you learn your trade from your father, be it leather work or smithing or carving or weaving, whatever it might be. You didn't go to an art school to learn that. You learned it from your father, your mother, your uncle, your grandfather, as you did farming.
Yeah. And it sounds a bit like a precursor to some of the microfinance stuff that's become the thing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a precursor.
Yeah.
A lot of things I didn't know, but I'm still kind of working in marginally in that sector, which maybe we'll get to when you ask me about how did I get into this. Yeah.
Okay. So wait, what time period were you there in West Africa? Uh-huh.
Well, I was in Africa in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I was in my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was I had 2 young children. Actually, my daughter was born in Africa.
Mm-hmm. And so you talk about being exposed to that kind of food culture where people were still cooking right out of the food that they grew. I mean, was that, for a lot of North Americans, I would say that's pretty shocking the first time you're exposed to that. And for a lot of us are kind of taken aback by it. I mean, it seems kind of dirty or strange. How did it strike you? And I don't think that, but
no. Well, I suppose anyone that's lived in a non-industrial world, you go to the market and everything you see is fresh,
mm-hmm.
and there's not a ton of refrigeration, so it really is fresh. And a lot of the actual work I did with promoting artisans were Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're totally paranoid about any food being slaughtered being absolutely fresh. There's a whole ritual about that. And they have very good senses. You know, I tend to think that Americans can't figure out what's fresh or not fresh without a thermometer
mm-hmm.
or some sort of scientific investigation, because we've forgotten how to use our sense of smell and touch and taste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was definitely a huge, important experience, because you're obliged to have a cook cooking the food, and the cook goes to the market and says, no, I'm not going to buy that American chicken. It has no taste, and I'm not going to go to the Lebanese shop that has the frozen American chicken. It just cooks like fish. It's done in 2 seconds, and it has no flavor, no consistency. So we're going to buy an African chicken. The African chickens were...
And this was a hired
Yeah,
cook?
you have... Yeah, everybody that lives in some international
mm-hmm.
framework has somebody that helps with the house and the cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was very particular about taste, and the food. And of course, it was an incredible experience being in Africa, and we wanted our cook to cook African food. And he had some resistance, because he said the women cooked the African food. The men, who were professional cooks, did not cook African food. And don't forget, I was living in a country that was colonized by the French, and the French consider themselves the best cooks in the world, and they labeled these professional people that worked for foreigners like us got categorized in 1 to 7 depending on their skills.
Mm-hmm.
And the pay scale would vary from grade 1 to grade 7 on all the things they knew how to do.
Nice. So, did he relent and cook African food for you?
Yes, once a week. Once a week, he did.
And did he cook haute cuisine, French cuisine, the rest of the time?
Yes, very haute cuisine.
That's fascinating. I mean, not many people have that experience.
No.
Yeah.
Very haute cuisine, things you can't even imagine.
Nice. Was your time in Latin America prior to that?
Prior.
Okay.
Prior to that,
Where?
yeah. I was in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
In Chile the food was awesome. I mean, it was like awesome. It was, this climate around Santiago is so ideal. There are no It's very hot and sunny in the daytime, but always cool at night, and so there are just no bugs or anything, and you have access to every kind of food you could possibly want from the sea and from
Right.
yeah everything.
Were you growing food during
In Chile.
those years?
In Chile, let me think. Yes, I was. I had a little garden with carrots and salad. I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did indeed. And in Africa, no. We just automatically got lucky and had an avocado tree out front, which happened to just be there, and a lemon tree.
Was it the big avocados or the?
It was the big avocados, yeah, and the lemon tree, and then, yeah, you just are graced with these amazing foods, you know.
And were you a cook? And
In Chile, yes, but in Ivory Coast, I wasn't anymore because I had a job, and it's quite challenging to have a job when you have to imagine it's as hot there all the time as it is here right now, all the time.
Yeah.
And I had 2 small children, so you are very busy just doing your job, trying to do your job, and that's why you have a hired cook. That's a full-time job to take care of the food, the shopping. We did have, the luxury of a refrigerator and a stove, things like that. Yeah.
So, at some point, you end up back here in Washington, D.C. Was this where the first place you came back to when you came to live in the States again?
No, we lived in Switzerland.
Okay.
We lived in Switzerland for almost 10 years in Bern, where they speak a dialect. They speak Swiss German.
Yeah.
And there I had a garden too. I had a garden. It was a small sort of space, but it was a very exciting garden. I think I planted it was a roof garden. I had a roof garden, and I again planted, things, radishes, carrots, and salads, and lots of sunflowers.
Nice. And was that
typical?
Yeah,
it was typical. But and there, they have beautiful farmers markets all over Europe. I don't think it was unusual.
Right.
The things we have here now are very typical in Europe.
Right.
You will, as a housewife, you'll get up really early in the morning and go to the market and get everything fresh, and you'll know the producers, and you'll know what's in season.
And is that still true in Europe? Do they hang on to that?
Oh, yeah, big
Good.
time.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I go back a lot. Like when mushrooms are in season, or whatever mushrooms they are, you'll know, and you'll get those.
Yeah.
Or whatever happens to be in season. And you're not going to be selling stuff that isn't in season, because it's your produce. Yeah.
So, I'll skip ahead a little bit. What do you think about the proliferance of farmers markets in a city like Washington, D.C. now?
I think it's wonderful and exciting. The only big criticism I have is it's become very elitist and exclusive to people that have the means to pay for this luxury food. It's the poor who are suffering from bad health and obesity and diabetes walk right by the farmer's market and get the stuff, from big box stores or the big box, because the farmer's market is prohibitive. Totally prohibitive. I'm assuming that quite a few immigrants would enjoy having a garden. It's sort of in their bones, When I first moved to this neighborhood, I was very involved with the school in my down the street, which is Bancroft Elementary, and I was, and finally that school got a grant from the Botanical Gardens to have a garden. And it was one of the first schools in the city. I think there was another one on Capitol Hill. They started with a butterfly garden, and then and now they have real gardens, and they actually have a teacher that's, not always doing the field work, but there's a deal with the neighborhood. Some neighbors are allowed to have a small patch, provided that they volunteer some of their time to work on the kids' patches.
Mm.
And that's good because that gives you an interaction between the neighbors and the kids.
Yeah.
And then they, so it's very exciting, but there are things that have gone under. I befriended a gentleman who was being paid for, I think, by the Botanical Gardens, who had a plot over at Taylor, 14th and Taylor, Mr. Smith, and he was actually, for years and years, he was going to about 7 different schools the entire year, teaching about the soil when it's dormant and what grows. And then as part of these summer recreation programs, the kids would spend their summer with him growing a small plot. And then funding dried up, and so we neighbors ended up getting a garden over there, and that was a garden I've had now. I had it for about 8 years. Now I just gave it up because I found something closer. And that was a shame because the kids were learning academically in schools and then doing the real thing. And I think it particularly has attracted immigrant kids.
Yeah.
Parents that knew that this was worth it. Was like perpetuating their cultural knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened to him?
I don't know. He just isn't there anymore, and the funding dried up, but it was the most beautiful space because it had that little house there. You know, 14th and Taylor.
Yeah. What's the name of it?
It's called Oak. Twin Oaks.
Twin Oaks. Yeah.
Twin Oaks. Yeah.
It has that little shed, that little greenhouse.
Yeah, it has two. Now he has two gardens on both sides, and it was well taken care of when he did it. Now it's still pretty cool, but there are a lot of enamored gardeners that never gardened before, and they want to garden and they want to learn how, and they don't realize that that garden needs your care
a lot,
constantly. Yeah.
Well, nice. Let's go back now. So you lived in Bern, Switzerland for a while, and then came to DC, or
then came to DC.
Okay. Anything else to say about life in Switzerland?
Well, it's a very rich culture. People have a negative attitude about Switzerland because the Swiss are kind of serious and seem very boring. But I guess I stayed there long enough to understand the humor and the richness of the culture and learn to understand the dialect.
Mm-hmm.
Big challenge because I knew German, but understanding the dialect's another story. And then I really, really loved it and appreciated it, you know. And of course, it helped me learn a lot about what I'm focusing on now, which is an environmental effort to use the sun to cook food.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because people were doing it there?
My mentor was a Swiss engineer who'd spent his most of his career in Africa, and he, because when I returned from the Ivory Coast, where my job was to improve the lives of artisans or keep them in their villages doing artisan work, well, I had to write reports and make suggestions for follow-up, and then I moved to Bern, and I read about this engineer who became my mentor that was going back to Africa teaching people that they could use the sun to cook their food and save the trees, save the forest. So I read about him in the paper. It was sort of lucky. It was like social marketing, which was with an old newspaper, you know. And so I contacted him, and he taught me what to do. I started in Switzerland, and then I brought the technology to Washington.
Okay. So we'll talk more about that. But was it, generally speaking, in this time when you were living in other countries, had you expected to come to live in the United States again?
Yeah, I guess I sort of thought I would, yeah.
And your kids were pretty old at that point?
No, they were, when we moved here, they were like 10 and 12.
Okay.
Yeah, they were in their preteens.
Okay. So you had identified the solar cooking as Something you really wanted to work on at that point.
Well, something I was continuing to do what we called back then Artisan enterprise development.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time when I first came to Washington with returned Peace Corps volunteer, creating a website that highlighted the work of artisans from all over Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of the beginning of the internet, and then trying to help them find a face in the world, you know, and then that sort of led to incorporating the food and the cooking all packaged together.
Okay. So what actually made you move back to DC though? What was
my husband's job? You know,
okay.
His job.
And he's a Swiss guy.
He was working. He got a job for the World Bank. I mean, he had a job in Africa for the World Bank, and then we moved to Switzerland, and he had a job for the Swiss government, and then he got a job here in Washington for the World Bank.
Mm-hmm. And were you happy to be returning to this area?
Yeah, it was. I was, but it was challenging because this area 25 years ago was different than it is today, and the kids were still, you know, that age, and my parents definitely didn't think we should move to this neighborhood because they were afraid that something might happen to us. It was rough, rough neighborhood, and. But I disliked the suburbs. I didn't want to. And this was the most international ward in the city, you know. Yeah. And it was like being all over the world, right here at home.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved so much. You know, you could get all the food you liked from every country you'd lived in right on Mount Pleasant Street. Mm-hmm. And of course.
And that was the draw.
The draw was all the language, the texture,
yeah.
The languages. And I just said, you know, we'll deal with this issue of fear and whatever. I figured I could deal with it, and the kids were old enough to sort of deal with it.
Okay. And yeah, DC 25 years ago, Mount Pleasant 25 years ago was pretty different, and there's a lot that happened, a lot of pivotal events.
Very pivotal events. But so the first garden I had in this house was actually 2 doors down. I had a neighbor 2 doors down in my backyard. We have rather large backyards here on 18th Street. And he had a huge, much more sun than I. We had a huge mulberry tree in the back that was preventing any sun getting in my garden at all. And I said, Mr. Lane, he was an older gentleman, probably my age now, he was then, and he had diabetes or something, and he was not using his garden. So I plowed up his yard and I started planting, and I had the most extraordinary harvests in his backyard because of this glorious sunshine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember taking pictures of my harvest, you know. It was very exciting, and naturally my kids were still home then, and they helped. And presently, because I gave up then I had a garden at near American University.
A community garden?
Yeah, community garden. I'm sorry, I'm having a lapse of memory. But they're very famous. I think they're the oldest community gardens in the city. Right on New Mexico Avenue down there. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
So I had that one for years and years, but then I gave up my car and I only had a bicycle, and it was doable but challenging to bike over there.
Yeah. And
there were no community gardens here. The Twin Oaks didn't exist yet. And there was a kind of temporary garden where the Tivoli is now, but that was very temporary, and then everybody got kicked out.
The Tivoli Theater?
Yeah, Tivoli Theater. It was just in disrepair, you know.
Across the street?
No, it's sort of behind the Tivoli, where all those new houses are. A lot of people did sort of garden just like that. You know, it wasn't official or anything.
Did you ever garden there?
I wanted to, but it was just, I knew it was going to be destroyed because they were being threatened all the time that they were going to get kicked out.
Huh.
Like some of these, stories you probably saw in the films at the Environmental Film Festival of these urban gardens, people fighting to keep their space.
Yeah.
So now I have a plot here at the corner because my neighbor is a new a couple with a new baby, and they have a big piece of land and 3 kind of raised beds. So I befriended the family and asked if I could have a small piece of their 3 raised beds, and so I had that for a couple of years.
In the really big house down
in
the
the
corner.
really big house.
Yeah.
In the really
is there a single family that lives there?
Yeah, in that really big house. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
How many years did you do it in Mr. Lang's backyard?
Oh, Mr. Lang's backyard. I probably about 4.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about 4 or 5 years, and then he passed away, so the house got sold, and I had to move out. But I did he had a huge fig forest back there too, and they were the guy that bought the house destroyed the whole yard and the fig forest, and I said stop, and I got one of the fig branches, and it's become this giant fig tree out front, and my neighbor's giant fig tree out front, and so the heritage of the Greeks that lived in the neighborhood lives on.
Is that where they came from?
Yeah, yes, they did. Because I've had some Greeks walk by my house saying, "Those are mission figs. Our ancestors in D.C. planted those."
Wow, very nice. Did you share the food with Mr. Lang? Did you have
a
deal?
Of course. Especially, but he couldn't eat more than 2 figs a day because he was diabetic.
Huh.
But I would harvest often from his fig forest. I could harvest 20 to 30 to 50 figs a day. It was just incredible.
Nice. And were you harvesting mulberries from the mulberry tree in your backyard?
Actually, it was the male and the female trees in the front. No, we didn't have the mulberries in the backyard. But now I've just discovered dry mulberries.
Oh.
Dry mulberries. And a friend of mine gave me some. And my European friends say that's very common, dried mulberries. They're delicious. So I'm looking for some recipes to use my dry mulberries that I did not dry myself, but they're packaged.
Nice. So then you went to Twin Oaks after doing some backyard gardening.
No, I was first near AU at.
Oh, that's right. I know which garden you're talking about. I don't remember the name either.
Isn't that embarrassing? I was there for many years. It's very well organized. Mm-hmm. And you have some old-timers there that just are so knowledgeable about gardening. And it's beautiful. And you're in the forest, and you sort of forget that you're in the city. You don't hear anything. You're just down there and you see the birds. And of course, there are deer that can jump over the highest fence. So, everybody's like, oh my gosh, you have to build some protection.
Was it irrigate? Was there water?
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
There were hoses and water, and there was a lot of communal work to be done to keep the trails going,
Yeah. Are there individual people that stand out in your memory from that garden?
Yeah, the man that sort of, it gets inspected by the Park Service. Mm-hmm. So they really have to keep it tip-top. Mm-hmm. And there are meetings, and there's a board, and then there are picnics. It's just really well done. And you can get kicked out. Mm-hmm. Do
you remember how many plots there were?
About 60. Mm-hmm. A lot. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm up at Mamie Lee Community Garden in Fort Totten, which is also...
Oh, that's very nice.
It is very nice. It's a Park Service land also. I don't know that we're tip-top, but yeah, we have to pass muster, too, with the Park Service.
I think one of the co-op members is a member there, Pat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many years were you there? Out near AU?
Probably 10 or 12, a long time.
Yeah.
And then I asked, I needed someone to help me, because it was pretty large. And I always, found someone that could help me. So I found a friend who lives in walking distance. and she then inherited the garden from me.
Okay.
She's a very good gardener.
Nice. And then you went without a car, and you.
Oh, I went with it. I used to bike there a lot, but it's challenging. Or take the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you remember growing?
Oh, there, I had lots of berries. I had very good tomatoes, and I had chards, and I had peas and beans. And I tried blueberries. We didn't succeed so much with the blueberries, although the little bush was very pretty. I planted okra. Okra's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I planted amaranth. Amaranth is extraordinarily beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I tried to process it, like they do in Mexico. That was really challenging. Well, I was been working in Mexico for a lot, so I asked these amaranth farmers how to process it. So I, harvested it. I spread it out on a sheet on my roof so it would dry, and then you kind of got to shake it. But those little tiny seeds are light as feathers, and they just fly everywhere. So I don't know how you keep them contained. So my end quantity of amaranth was very little, and ever since then, I don't think the price is too high for what you buy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you remember getting seeds? I mean, were you...
Let's see. Some other people were growing amaranth there too, and you have, like quinoa, you have the different colors, and the one is sort of this burgundy color amaranth, and it goes totally wild. It almost looks like dreadlocks when it grows, which is crazy, beautiful. So I probably got it from people in the garden. Yeah.
Nice. And then the next garden was Twin Oaks at that point?
Yeah, the next garden was Twin Oaks.
And that was new. It sounds like that was...
Yes, it was pretty new, and now it's so popular that they have a waiting list of like over 200 to get a little plot.
Because it's not a huge space, is it?
No, it's not a huge space, but if you're not a gardener, even a little space is a lot of work to take care of it. And in the south side of the Twin Oaks garden, there's a groundhog. He's quite famous. We think he's the only groundhog left that's really has a really enjoyable life, because he's found a hideaway in there, and there's no trap that's big enough to trap him. And he's not going to go in a trap because life is...
tame, almost.
No, it's just life is so good there. He's like in the most gourmet restaurant for any groundhog ever. Mm-hmm. So it's very challenging to know what to plant.
Yeah.
He'll snap off everything that's just growing.
And it is just one groundhog?
Well, we don't know if he has a lady friend now, because it's just crazy, and there have been efforts to trap him and transport him out to Maryland or somewhere like that. But nobody says we can't kill the groundhog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So were you there when it was founded, that garden?
No, I was there when Mr. Smith was still giving the classes to the kids, and I would bike by there, and I'd go in there and say, I'd see these gorgeous tomatoes and far too many, and I said, who's going to harvest all these tomatoes? And I was already into solar cooking and solar drying, and I told him, I said, I have a very nice solar dryer. I'd like to donate it to the garden, because you have an abundant harvest, and it's going to rot. And I gave him some solar dried tomatoes, just so he knew that you can solar dry the tomatoes. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I ended up donating that dryer much later to a Common Good City Farm, which is in Detroit Park.
Yeah.
That's an urban garden that I've been volunteering at a little bit in these past years.
Nice. What was Mr. Smith's full name? I'm curious.
I don't know. He was African American, very knowledgeable. I'm sure he'd been, doing this as a career, and maybe he retired. I don't know. I've lost touch. but I do know that the funding dried up for that.
Yeah. But that's how that space at Twin Oaks got
Yeah, I believe it did. It was somehow connected to. He actually would go to about 7 different schools during the non-growing season and go on talking about growing. It would be good to find out, simply because now the Botanical Garden has these wonderful programs, exciting programs, beautiful programs for the kids, and it's just so amazing to go there and learn about your herbs and everything.
Yeah.
Everything. So back to the gardens and the markets. It's just like very exciting. One of the most exciting things I did in the past years was to go to the Slow Food Conference, and that was in Turin, Italy, and that was like a total effort to keep biodiversity alive and seeds and support artisans from all over the world, farmers, because farmers are almost always artisans too, and it was just this huge accumulation of people from every walk of life from all over the world.
What year was that?
Like 2000, I think it was 2007 or 8. It's like not every year. It's like every other year. I want to say 2007, 8, or 9. But it was so exciting that I thought I've got to go again.
Are you active with the Slow Food?
Well, I joined the Slow Food.
Here?
I joined the Slow Food here in DC, and I just was reading about them because they still send me messages, and they have an event at Union Market, and also at Woolly Mammoth Theater. They're always trying to promote theater and the art and food and wine and all that stuff. And make some money for the Slow Food. I see that they have a very interesting guy who's the new president for the United States. Because you need. I did not keep going to the Slow Food in DC because it was doing very. It was more refined than I wanted. It was learning, and it was always paying money for something. Like when we had a gathering, it wasn't. It was to go out to dinner to some really high scale, classy place, and you had to pay.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really what I was looking for. I wanted. I guess I wanted people that would garden, and I don't think people in the Slow Food movement were gardening yet. I don't think there was the connection between.
Yeah.
It was too new. There was no connection between food, eating,
growing food, and eating
not
food.
yet. Not yet.
Do you think they are more?
Well,
now,
I do because of. Maybe it's just because of the people I know and Michael Pullen's huge contribution to. Wake up, guys. Start making an impact. Start gardening, and then the biggest contribution you can make to sustainability is cook. Yeah. To your own happiness, and to sustainability, cook, and your own health, and that's a mantra and a message that didn't exist when it's so new. I hadn't read The Omnivore's Dilemma yet. I don't think it was published yet, or Cook. That's brand new.
But would you say that was always how you, or for many years, how you looked at the activity of growing food all the way to preparing and then eating
cooking
it?
Yeah, because it's good that you asked that question. Yes, because it's one thing is connected to the other. I have to divert a little bit. Since I created a nonprofit that promotes Cooking with the Sun, a lot of the work we do is with desperate people in desperate situations that have nothing, refugees. And when you have, and the refugee community, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and the World Food Program, etc., never thought that food given to the refugees needed to be cooked. The World Food Program, of which we all participate, we give all our surplus food. That's, people are making money off of this. Shipping companies are making money off of this. Farmers are making money. Shipping the food to the refugees, and then that's it. And there was no way to cook it. So it's only since Darfur where the women were getting raped and the men were getting killed when they left the camps to look for firewood, that somebody said, "Oh my goodness, why are they looking for firewood? They don't have any other way to cook the food the World Food Program gives them. We better give them some stoves to cook the food." So there's been a revolution since the Darfur crisis, which is 2003, 2004, 2005, that stoves are needed for half the world's population. And they're needed to cook the food. We eat food you can cook it in a snap, right?
Yeah.
But the poorest of the world, they eat tubers or the legumes, beans, that need a lot of fuel. And that's the healthiest food you can eat and the most affordable. And that food is what requires the most fuel. So the fuel is competing, finding access to fuel is competing with the $1 you might have. Not us, but a lot of people in the world only have $1.
Yeah.
You got to spend it on food or fuel. Today's dollar's got to go to the fuel, and tomorrow's dollar is going to go to the food.
Yeah. So, but prior to Darfur, when you talk about this turning point, this was already something that you were really interested in.
Oh, very, very aware of.
Yeah.
Very aware of, because I was working in refugee camps. And you have people that receive dry beans, very dry beans.
Yeah.
And you're in a refugee camp with 20 to 80,000 people. You can't even imagine. That's like Mount Pleasant plus. And they have their allotment of food and no way to cook it, and they can't eat it raw.
Yeah.
So we were there, do-gooders, the solar cooking people, saying, "There's lots of sun here. Let's show these people that they can use the sun and save themselves. Use the sun to cook the food."
How do they work?
How does the solar cooker work?
Yeah.
It's a heat trap. It's very simple. You are, it's like, think of the inside of your car, parked in the sun with dark upholstery. So a solar cooker is just a dark something, a dark pot, and then you have some way to trap that light going into this dark colored pot so it can't get out. So the light goes through this greenhouse, we call it, and it becomes heat. So it's solar thermal. It only works when the sun is out, and it just traps the heat. And in this area, you get up to about 270. And 270 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And so you can cook just about anything.
And then you put a pot of water on top of it, or
no,
inside of it?
I can show you, and you can try to. It's for instance, I have a dark colored pot, like one of these camping pots, with a lid, and I can put a chicken in there. I can put stuffed green peppers in there, or something for my garden, my carrots, and I'll close the lid. I do not need to add oil or water because it's going to sort of sweat. It's a slow cooker. And then I'll put that whole thing in a turkey bag. Mm-hmm. A turkey bag serves as my greenhouse. Greenhouse meaning it's my heat trap. Mm-hmm. I tie the turkey bag up, and I put the food now that's inside the dark colored pot in the turkey bag in a reflector that looks a lot like these reflectors they used in the 60s to get a suntan at the beach. Yeah. Or it looks like one of these things you put in your car to keep the heat from getting into your car. And that just reflects the heat into the pot that's in the middle of this reflector. That's the simplest one that I taught a lot of people to use in refugee camps in the late 90s. And it's called, the one you can find online is called a cook kit. And since then, there have been many, many reincarnations, and my organization has developed one that's actually more sophisticated and more industrially made and easier to use.
And do you here in Mount Pleasant cook with your solar cooker?
I do indeed. I solar cook every sunny day. I'm a bit obsessed. I do, and I've turned a lot of people onto this obsession because it's a lot of fun, and you feel like you're getting something for nothing.
Yeah.
It's a little freebie. If I want to make my lentils, I just put my solar cooker out in my back porch and let her rip. I don't have to worry about... I know the sun's going to be out there for at least 2 to 5 hours, and it'll be enough to cook my lentils, or it'll be enough to roast my chicken or bake my cake.
Mm-hmm.
I bake a lot of cakes in my solar cooker.
Mm.
Or banana bread.
Yeah.
And some of my harvest, of course, my carrots and green peppers, eggplant, tomatoes.
Excellent. Is that so? Did that become your full-time work? Your career?
It has become my career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my career started late. I guess we founded our nonprofit about just before I turned 60.
Mm-hmm.
So it has become my work, because we've been searching for funding, and we got funding, and we had an excellent, exciting pilot project in Mexico, and carried on to El Salvador and many parts of the world. But also, in recent times, there's a lot of interest here. Last summer, around 4th of July, somebody from Potomac, Maryland called us and said, "Thank God you gave me a solar cooker, because my power's out, and I can't cook anything. And everything in my refrigerator's running. But the sun is here."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And also that one winter, 2010, when the big snowstorm, there were an astonishing number of people that relied on solar cooking, including DC's most renowned chef, Jose Andres. Jose Andres had a parabolic given to him by his friend from Spain, and he had no power for 4 days. So he wheeled that thing out of his garage, and there's a wonderful YouTube video of him cooking on this thing, just very excited about, in the middle of the snow, cooking. Because after the storm, even if it's snow or rain or whatever it is, there's always bright, beautiful sunshine.
Yeah.
Just to say that you don't need warmth. You don't need to feel like it's hot summertime to solar cook. You just need good light.
So it is
Good
light.
light.
Yeah.
Good, clean light, yeah.
Very interesting.
Naturally, it's not the ideal place. We could, here in this area, we could cook probably April to October. This year's been a bit crazy with so much rain. But the area of the world we really want to have impact on is the Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer, that belt around the world where people are deprived of fuel. Fuel meaning firewood, charcoal, which is the fuel of choice because it's usually free, or it used to be.
Right.
It used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see a wonderful connection, and I'm happy to tell you this past year, I was at the Common Good City Farm. The woman that was the manager there got a small grant. The kids had a 4-week or 5-week summer program, and she included solar cooking in her program so they could make the connection between planting, composting, harvesting, and cooking and eating.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to hear these young kids, they're all like teenagers, you know, what they learned and how they had to sweat and work and what they learned from doing that program in the summer.
Yeah. Nice. And you continue to volunteer with them?
I am doing it again next week. Yeah, I will do just one day. They reduced it just down to one day. And I don't actually know if they have a grant for these 17 kids like they did last year or not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what else? We're kind of up to your current life.
Up to my current
in Mount
life.
Pleasant, sounds
so
like. But you're still growing.
Yeah, I'm still growing. I still do I did a lot of demonstrating of solar cooking at the farmers market here in Mount Pleasant. Like I used to be out there every Saturday.
Yeah, which is one of the quote unquote old market.
Is it?
I
It
mean,
must be 10 years old now, huh?
Yeah, I mean
It's one of the older markets.
I think of it as a kind of a go-to farmers market in the city.
Right.
But it's not really that old, is it?
Well, it's just old. It's old considering that they're not. And now I think it might be 10 years old now. It was so exciting when it started, and it was like unbelievable that we're going to get a farmer's market.
Yeah.
So, and the guy that runs it, he's a neighbor. He's been living here as long as me. You probably know him. Robert Fraser. Robert Fraser. He's sort of taken over managing the market because we don't want it to go away. It takes a bit of managing. And he makes sure that there's a little area for the little kids to play in the shade, and then the bike repair in the corner. And then he even invited people from the City Garden Co-op here in the basement to have a free space to just show and tell that it exists.
And how long is the co-op? Is the co-op legit now? I mean, in terms of okay, so hopefully that won't get you in trouble. Having it on the interview. How long have you been working in the City Garden Co-op?
Oh, as long as I've lived here.
Yeah. Did it come here when you?
Before.
It was already here. Wow. And you knew that when you bought this house? All right. Yeah. And DC doesn't have a lot of proper food co-ops. It's
the Glut,
and that one. I mean,
well, some people tell me that there used to be more, but I don't quite know. It's worth somebody submitting a proposal to get a grant to write a story about that, because that was a fascinating topic.
Yeah, but it's interesting that considering how kind of local food and community around food has kind of become the thing to do, sometimes in a little too elitist a way, but it's at least on people's minds. But co-ops in DC have not blown up the way farmers markets and community gardens
No,
have.
it's true, they haven't. We have to work. But there's just a whole lot of young people that really will. They have been the astonishing number. They say, I was at a co-op at college, and I liked it, and now I want to continue. I'm searching for it. Majority are young people, and the foodies. I mean, they're often not big meat eaters.
Right.
I mean, I don't think they're narrow-minded about food, but they're often not big meat eaters.
Yeah.
They're usually good cooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
What did you grow this year?
Oh, you know what I grew? I grew potatoes. I had grown potatoes before, but I had an incredibly good harvest of potatoes, and I was quite astonished.
What kind?
Red potatoes. I actually got them. They were sprouting, and I put them in, and it rained so much I thought for sure they're all going to come out rotten, but they didn't.
Nice.
So that was my most successful crop. I have tomatoes in my garden now that don't look really very happy because it just rained too much on them, and this current garden I have is a bit too shady. And although I did buy some good, I invested in getting some good dirt. I don't think it's that good. So I have most success still with just salad, which is something I really enjoy. Having abundant salad and kale and carrots and things like that.
Yeah. What advice do you have for Washington, D.C. gardeners? I mean, what are the tricky parts about growing food in the district?
Well, for instance, my neighborhood used to have rats in the alley. And I suppose we still do, but you don't see them scattering all the time when you walk down the alley like they did. So you would hesitate to plant a tomato in your backyard because the rat would get the tomato. And of course there were squirrels. I just read about someone online who got actually two things. I read about a young woman who won an award from the Green Business Green America's Green Business, and she created something called Love and Carrots.
Oh yeah.
You probably know about it. And she kind of goes around and helps people set up a garden. I guess she gets paid for it, right?
Yeah, she's an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
right?
she's an entrepreneur. She's got a business, and she's giving people help to get themselves started. How do I start this thing? And wonderful. Raised beds are the answer, right? They really are. And then there's the UDC has a big thing going on tomorrow called Garden of the Senses. I can't go, unfortunately, but it's this outreach because it's a land-grant college and they have space out in Beltsville.
Yeah.
Apparently, have you checked all of that out?
No, I mean I know they are DC's ag extension school.
Yeah. I'm keen on checking it out. I haven't really done it, but I think that's really exciting that you can go study at UDC and learn something about food and gardening, which was unheard of even 5 years ago. And in the faculty, I even met some gentleman from Ghana who was talking about some of these crops from his culture. So it was indigenous and ethnic and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think people should just take the plunge, and you'll see it. More and more people here with their tiny, tiny front yards are going to have a little tiny raised bed with something. And the rewards you get from growing that something are just amazing. Don't start with anything big. Just start with something small.
Salad.
Yeah, salad. And watch it grow, and then learn that way.
Yeah.
And then it'll automatically get you talking to your neighbors because they're going to wonder what you're doing.
And here in Mount Pleasant, which is I would say a community where people care about how houses look and things like that. Do you think people are being receptive to growing food in the front yard?
Yes, you can see it. It's every block you'll see somebody growing food in the front yard now. Every block. And you never saw that before.
Yeah. Well, that's nice to hear. Is there anything else that we missed?
This is fun.
What else would
I'm learning as much from you as you are from me. Yeah. Well,
I'm particularly interested in people who stand out in your memory. If there's anybody else we didn't talk about from a community garden, or the farmer's market, or things like that. If there are, and if not, it's fine. But
I'll just wrap this up by saying that I think it's really great that we have this in certain schools, like Bancroft School has this awareness of food grows in the dirt and gardening. And there was a neighbor here she's still called the Butterfly Lady, who was the one that helped a third grade teacher down the street who's now retired, Tony Conca, get a grant from the Botanical Gardens to start the butterfly garden. And I think that's so exciting because at that time at Bancroft School I was doing a fiber arts program, which was all about spinning and weaving and knitting and felting and all that. And that time the school was very dominated by new immigrants, Vietnamese and Latinos and Ethiopians, etc. The demographics have now changed again, and I thought if the kids learn about gardening and food and they learn about fiber arts, they're going to feel like their own culture has value. Because academically they're struggling because they have this No Child Left Behind stress, and they're learning English, and at home nobody speaks English.
Yeah.
and sometimes they don't even know how to read and write their own language properly. And so they're not doing as well academically as they should, but they do have these inherited skills of planting and growing and harvesting and cooking, you know, and also manipulating threads, fiber art, you know. They know that because grandma might be a knitter or do sewing. So I even applied for grants from the DC Humanities Council back then, explaining that this was part of enhancing cultural appreciation and diminishing conflicts within the school.
Yeah. Nice.
I didn't get the grant.
Well, they were pretty good. I like them. I'll tell you what my experience was, but thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise. And let's end the interview there.
Thank you,
Sure.
David. Yeah.